Okay. Thanks everyone for coming. I want to talk, first of all, thanks to, I don't think he's not here, but Rabbi can help me a lot prepare for this, and also my dad and my rabbi uncle. But, and I want to talk a little bit about the sugya of Simcha Geula Tefillah. It's a sugya I learned with my grandfather last year. And we kind of learned it through the lens of things he heard from Rav Soloveitchik, and I just want to share some of that. Okay. So the Gemara on Brachos Daf Daled Amud starts off, Amar Mar, Kor Kriyat Shema Yudhalel, Misaili Rabbi Yochanan, Damar Rabbi Yochanan, Ezu ben Olam Haba, Zeh Somech Geula Tefillah Shel Arvis. So there's a writer that says a person should read Kriyat Shema and then daven. We say it's a support for Rabbi Yochanan, who holds that there's a chiyuv smicha geula tefillah by mar. What that means is that the idea of smicha geula tefillah is that you should be put the bracha of, theoretically, specifically the bracha of Gal Yisrael right next to your Shemona Esrei. So he says, so everyone agrees that you have to do so by Shachris, but the question is, do you do it by mar? So Rabbi Yochanan says yes, and we have this writer that supports him. Rabbi Shuv and Levi Omer Tefillah be'emtza tiknum. That basically the idea is that our tefillos during the day are kind of sandwiched by the times we say Kriyat Shema. So in the morning, right, we say Kriyat Shema and then we daven. We have Mincha, and then according to Rabbi Shuv and Levi, we daven Tefillah Arvit Shemona Esrei, and then we would have the second Kriyat Shema. So they kind of are sandwiched in between the two Kriyat Shemas. And then the Gemara asks, "But my kamiflagi," I'm gonna go back to that a little bit later, but I'm going to skip that for now and skip down to like 3 lines from the bottom of the first source. The middle line, Masiv Mar, Ray the Ravina. Basically, they write raise a kasha and Rav Yochanan from the following breakdown. That right? The Erev Mivarach Shtaim Lefanel Shtaim Lacharel. Right? You say 2 brachot before Marv and after Marv. The 2 after being first Gal Yisrael, but then you after Gal Yisrael you say Hashkivenu in the bracha of Shomer Yisrael. If we said that Smicha Geula Tefillah is about being Mesamech Bracha of Gal Yisrael to Shemona Esrei, and you're interrupting that kind of Smicha by putting Hashkivenu in the middle. So how could you say there's a chiyuv Smicha Geula Tefillah by Marv if you don't actually do that, you say Hashkivenu in the middle. Va'amri Kivin to Takinu Rabbi the Hashkivenu Kegula Arech Tadam. So Rabbi Yochanan answers, once Rabbanon or Matakin Hashkivenu, it's considered a Gula Rechta. We'll talk like a little bit about what that kind of means. But basically, I want to kind of discuss 2 main questions based on this Gemara. One being kind of like, what's the nature of this din of Smicha Geula Tefillah? What's it all about? And second being, what does the Gemara mean when it says Hashkivenu is considered a Gula Rechta? Because seemingly the bracha of Hashkivenu doesn't actually mention Gula Mitzrayim at all. It doesn't talk about it. So how can we say that Hashkivenu is a Gula Rechta? In what sense is it considered a Gula Rechta? Fine. So also really gets the sugya started because he asked 2 questions that all the Rishonim are going to ask after. Basically, we know there at least in Ashkenaz we have a minhag to say after the bracha of Hashkivenu, which the Gemara does call a Gula Rechta, but after that, even we say psukim of Yirei Neinu, some of us, and then we say Kaddish. So the question is, right, if you say there's right, the maskana of the Gemara seems to be that there is a chiyuv smicha geula tefillah because like we said at the beginning, the bright that is misayeh to Rabbi Yochanan. Yet we seem to not hold like that because we actually interrupt it in a few ways. The second question that they ask is that we know that we paskin that Mariv is a tefillat reshut. So right, you don't actually, meaning it's not a tefillat chova, it's a tefillat reshut. So the question is, if Mariv is a tefillat reshut and you don't actually necessarily have to say it, how can you say there's a chiyuv smicha geula tefillah by Mariv, right? How can you have a chiyuv to be mesamech 2 things when one of those things you don't have to say at all? And those are the kind of the 2 questions that all the Rishonim ask. And Tosot on the third line in that source after the period. Quotes Rav Amram going, Umihu b'seder Rav Amram going perish. Masha anu omrim kadish bein legulas l'tfila arvit. Lashminan de lo bayin mesamach gula the arvit l'tfila. Mishum de tfila arvit reshut. Basically, Rav Amram going says ein achanami. Basically, you don't. There's no. Even though the Gemara seems to say that the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan is actually supported, there's no chiyuv smicha gula l'tfila by mar. Fine. But Tosfot says something different. Veloni here, he doesn't agree. V'tema kashi hilchasa hilchasa the kaimulan tefillat avos rishus. V'hacha paskinin k'Rav Yochanan sarach lo. Right, like the question we asked before, right? How if marv is rishus, how can you say there's a chiyuv smicha gula tefillah? Right? Even though marv is rishus, it's not a kashi hilchasa. It's not a steer between two. Sarach Omar da afilu iu sover Rabbi Yochanan Karav the Amar Rishut he mikomako mechayiv lismo. Even though we pass in that Mar Rishut, still you have to, there's a chiyuv to be somech gula tefillah. And if we kind of I don't know, were to like boil this down to like the simplest pshat machloket, it's basically machloket between Tosfot and Rav Amram is the idea of Mar being Rishut, is that soter a chiyuv smicha gula tefillah, or can they actually, according to Tosfot, can they work together? Now I think there are like a few different ways you can explain this machloket, but you could say maybe it's machloket and how you understand mar being reshut, maybe. But I want to kind of suggest that maybe they could argue they take two sides of how to understand smicha gula tefillah. One way to understand smicha gula tefillah would be to say that it's kind of this kind of separate kiyum that we've never heard about. It's a chiyuv b'fnei atzmo that you, for some reason, you want to be somech gula tefillah. I didn't put it on the makor, but Rabbeinu Yonah has a piece where he kind of tries to go through a bunch of stars of why a person would be samech gula tefillah. And one of the things he says is that this interesting idea that what's the idea that we say that the purpose of Gulat Mitzrayim was not just to be kind of bnei chorin for ourselves, but the purpose of Gulat Mitzrayim was kili bnei Yisrael avadim. And we know ezohi avoda shebelev, zohi tefillah. So Rabbeinu Yonah kind of argues that what we do when we're mesamech gula tefillah, we show that the purpose of the Gula was not just to be kind of free and for ourselves and do whatever we want, but the purpose of the Gula was to be ovdei Hashem, and that's what we're showing. But again, it's like I think it's a very nice idea, but it's not. It's something separate that we've kind of never heard of before. It's a kiyum b'fnei atzmo. Another way to understand it is that smicha gula tefillah is actually kind of a din in tefillah itself, and it actually enhances the like kufa shel shmon esrei and amid l'fnei Hashem in some sort of way. And I think if we kind of take those two sides, we can explain the ma'achuk between Tosfot and Rav Amram Gaon. According to Rav Amram Gaon, maybe tefillah is again this kiyum b'fnei atzmo. It's this external din to tefillah, and therefore, right, the kasha kind of stands, right. How can you have a chiyuv to be somech two things when one of those things you don't have to say at all? But according to Tosfot, who might hold that, I think you can maybe say that he holds that it's actually a din in tefillah itself, and if you're not mesamech gula tefillah, there's some chisaron in your tefillah. So you can argue that, right, even though marvs are reshut, once you're davening marv, there's a chiyuv to be somech them. Why? Because just like even though marvs are reshut, there are all kind of rules to when you daven marv. You have to daven standing up. You have to have the proper kavanah. You still have to say the right bracha. You can't just make up whatever you want. And so too, you have to be mesamech gula too, because it's a din in tefillah itself. Right? Just the fact that it's reshut doesn't mean you can do away with all hilchos tefillah. And I think that could be kind of one way to explain this machloket. I was talking to my uncle last night. He mentioned to me that there's a big machloket Rishonim and Gaonim about the brachos kriyat shema. We know that kriyat shema you have until 3 hours up until in the day to say, and we know that that for like shachrit at least you have up 4 hours into the day to say. But there's a machlokes about which one the birkat kriyat shema actually fall into. Do you say them in the time period you would say kriyat shema 3 hours, or in the time period you say shmona esrei, which is 4 hours? And kind of intuitively I would kind of think like, okay, they're called birkas kriyat shema, like you say them with kriyat shema, but actually like there are like Rishonim who hold otherwise, and that they're actually, you can say them as late as 4 hours. So you don't have to say it, but you could say that these two kind of discussions are like very related. Meaning, if you see the bracha of Gal Yisrael, meaning birkat kriyat shema, and specifically the bracha of Gal Yisrael as connected to hilchot kind of tefillah, and I think it would be much easier to understand the chiyuv smicha gula tefillah as it did in tefillah itself. Whereas if you saw it as meaning connected to kriyat shema, then I would think that lends towards more the side that smicha gula tefillah is actually kind of external tefillah, or maybe even in kriyat shema. Fine, but in any case, I think there are like a number of good rayas for this idea that smicha gula tefillah actually is din in tefillah. First, the Makor number 3, the Gemara in Brachot Daf Lamed Aleph discusses different kind of cases where a person is kind of in a b'diavad situation where he knows he's going to have to be traveling later that day, and he can't, for whatever the reason is, because of that, he's not going to be able to do a certain mitzvah in the most lechatchila way. So describe the cases, right? The tiny hishkim, let's say, aderech mevin lo shofar the kaya lulav unanea megillah korebo kishiagias man kriyat shema kore. Fine. Hishkim le'shev b'karno v'asvina mitpalel kishiagias man kriyat shema kore. The writer says, according to the Tanna Kama, what you should do, let's say you're traveling that day, and you know what that meaning you're leaving before Zman Kriyat Shema, and you know that if you kind of wait to daven when you're going to be on the wagon or on the boat, then you're not going to be able to daven standing up. So what Tanna Kama suggests is you should daven before you leave, and then you should get on the boat or the wagon and say Kriyat Shema, and then you'll be good. Rabbi Shimon argues. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer bein kach ubein kach kore kriyat shema u'nipalel kei sheyismoch gula tefillah. What you should do is you should be kore kriyat shema u'nipalel, meaning while you're already on the way, even though you're going to have to daven sitting down, so that you can be mesamech gula tefillah. My kemiflagi mar savar tefillah mu'mar adif u'mar savar mesamech gula tefillah adif. The Tanna Kama holds that it's more important to daven standing up than to be mesamech gula tefillah. Rav Shimon ben Elazar holds it's actually more important to be mesamech gula tefillah than to daven standing up. At very least, in order to understand Rav Shimon ben Elazar, my intuition would say that you have to hold that smicha gula tefillah is actually a din in tefillah, and that there's some like inherent chisaron in your tefillah if you're not mesamech gula tefillah. Because we know obviously tefillah mu'umad is a din in tefillah, and it would be hard for me to imagine that some kind of din study, the side kiyum of being mesamech gula tefillah would kind of outweigh tefillah mu'umad, which is a chisaron in your tefillah. Now, obviously, you could argue, but it's a really important, right? Rabbi Yonah gives such a good reason. It's a really important kiyum, and you could say that, but it's still, I think, if I were to have to choose between the two, I would think that it didn't in tefillah, which we see as like such an kind of ikar of our kind of life in our day. I would think that it outweighs this sort of kiyum ifnei hatzmo. So I think according to Rav Shimon ben Elazar, I would argue he holds that it's a din in tefillah itself. Now, according to the Tanna Kama, I could see it either way. I mean, you could say that, right? He also thinks it's a din in tefillah itself. It's just a question of which one's more important. Is it a bigger chisaron to daven sitting down, or is it a bigger chisaron to not be mesamech gula tefillah? And he thinks it's a bigger chisaron to daven sitting down than not be mesamech gula tefillah. So he holds tefillah mu'umad adif. Alternatively, he could hold that smicha gula tefillah is the other side. I mean, it's actually a kiyum b'fnei atzmo, and therefore, a kiyum b'fnei atzmo is not going to outweigh or beat out smicha gula tefillah, which we see as kind of as tefillah me'umad, which is kind of inherent to the tefillah. Similarly, the Shulchan Aruch paskins that if you have a choice between smicha gula, being misamech gula tefillah, and davening tefillah b'tzibor, and those two clash, he says you should daven, you should be misamech gula tefillah. And I would kind of make the same argument meaning that I would expect that to be true only if you held it was a din in tefillah itself. And then the last proof for this idea, which I think is really strong, and Rabbi Yonah discusses a case where a person finds himself in a tzibor, which is davening Mariv before Zman, like proper Zman Kriyat Shema, before it's 8. So he says, what should you do? You should daven in the Beit HaKnesset Kriyat Shema and say all the things around it, except don't say like the actual brachos themselves, the chatimot. And then when you should daven that tefillah of Yitpali Matzibar B'ota Tefillah Yitpal Al Shem. It should say the right here says Chova over there. You should daven that tefillah Shem Chova. That's your ma'ar for that night. ואחר כך בביתו יקרא קריאת שמע אחר יציאת כוכבים בברכותיה ובתיכות וחתימות. And then when you get back home after today's, you should say Kriyat Shema, but this time with all the brachot and chatimot, and finish up Gal Yisrael and Shomer Yisrael. And then daven another tefillah Shem, kind of sounds a little bit weird. Cool, I think is that the next line. Umash mitpal oto bracha kadesh l'smoke gula tefillah right at the end when you daven the second marv in your house and you're somach gula tefillah because you said Gal Yisrael and then with the bracha, and now you're davening this tefillah nedava. Havik kamosh mecharish davar v'tfiloto ve'in sarach mecharish b'davar acher. It's considered a chit, right? The halacha by tefillah nedava is that if you want to daven a tefillah nedava, you need to be mecharish b'davar. You need to say something new that you haven't said already. Says the Rabbi Yonah that you're being somech gula tefillah can count as that mecharish b'davar. That's something new in your tefillah. And I think that obviously that can only be true if you look at the smicha gula tefillah as kind of a chiddush in your tefillah. Yeah, Moshe.
Is Rabbi Yonah saying to leave out the chatimah from the bracha before Kriyat Shema also?
The chatim, meaning the first time you daven in the Knesset, yeah. Why? He clearly thinks that you want to say Birko Kriyat Shema after state, which is the real Kriyat Shema. Connected, so the Birkos are connected to your kind of right. But meaning you're saying once you're doing that, your smicha gula tefillah. Right, exactly. I want to get to that. Good transition. So what is this? What is this bisaron in your tefillah if you're not misamech gula tefillah? Right. Well, what's so bad? What did you lose out on in your tefillah? What's the chiddush if you do say it? So first, kind of model of how to explain this. I would base on a Gemara in Brachos. That's a 6 Makor. The Gemara is kind of discussing, trying to justify the seder of the brachot and Shemona Esrei. Right? Why do we say the Divrei Shevach, the first 3 brachos before we ask for all our needs? Right. So the Gemara asks, should a person first say his bakashot and then daven? It says no. Pasuk says lishmo arina vel tefillah. Rina zu tefillah. Rashi says tefillah means tefillah shel shevach. And tefillah zu bakasha. And when the pasuk says tefillah, it means ask for the bakasha. Now, right, what's this idea? Why is it so important that we put our divrei shevach, the first three bracha before our bakasha? So Rav Soloveitchik explained this idea as then in right, he called it tefillah ba matir. You need a matir in order to daven. What does that mean? Basically, if you were to go in and just kind of just stand up right now and start asking Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for everything you need, it's a little bit like kind of chutzpahdik or whatever. Meaning you can't just do that, right? You're standing in front of Melech Malchei Malchim, and you can't just start it, right? It's not just like a stomp thing you can do to go and start asking for everything you want. So what do you need to do? You need to kind of like get your foot in the door, so to speak, divrei shevach. And then once you have that in place, you have a matir to daven, so to speak. Meaning the same way, right? This would be like kind of the analogy. The same way, right? In order to eat meat, you need a shechta. You have the matir of shlita. So in order to daven, you need to have a matir of divrei shevach beforehand. So how is this connected? So you can argue that what Simcha's Gula Tefillah is doing is just an extension of that idea, right? One shevach is the first three brachos, and an extension of that is praising Hashem for thank you for taking us out of Mitzrayim, and now we can we're kind of like more in the door sort of, and we're ready to daven. I actually think Rashi, quoting the Yerushalmi, says that explicitly on our daf. Makori. V'amrinu b'rachli Yerushalmi, mi she'eno somach kula tefillah l'mahu doma, lo'avo shomach sheba v'dafak al pitcho shomach yatsa hamach matzo shehiflik afu hiflik. Elo yeh adam mekarev l'kadosh baruch le'elav umartzeo b'tishbach l'b'kosim shalitzat mitzrayim. You should get close to Hashem and start kind of the conversation through divrei shevach of Yetziat Mitzrayim. Right, Hashem kind of gets close to you. And once you're kind of in that place where you're in the right mindset, after you've said these divrei shevach, now you're in a place where you can ask for all your needs of and but not until you've said the divrei shevach. So meaning Rashi basically says this idea explicitly that the idea of smicha gula tefillah is that it's an extension of the matir that you get of the first three brachos of Shema Esrei. You kind of sing kind of the Shara Kadosh Baruch Hu with praises of Yetziat Mitzrayim and Hagin Avot and Tagibor, and then once you're done with that, now you can ask for your needs. So that's one way kind of to understand this thing. Yeah.
But then wouldn't you expect that you always need to be so much gula to be like even like a mincha, for example?
Yeah. So mincha, I asked my grandfather that question when we were learning, and he argued to me that mincha, we actually do that al yedei ashrei. And that's what the purpose of ashrei is, to say, potech et yadech masbilcho haratzonam, right? All of ashrei is basically a list of different, right? Out through tough of divrei shevach to Hashem. But yeah, I think it's a good point. Right. The next kind of so that's one way to understand this din of smicha gula tefillah. Another way, which is also my grandfather told me b'shem of Soloveitchik. Before he said this one, he started to say, he's like, this is the Yiddish word cup of Rav Soloveitchik. And I was like, what does that mean? He's like, well, if I would tell you in English, you wouldn't understand how genius it is. So I have to say in Yiddish. But fine. So Soloveitchik's next idea was that what do you do when you're Mesamech Gula Tefillah? Really, we don't really care about, it's not about dafka the Gula of the Gula Mitzrayim. What we're really trying to do is kind of create this kind of chivur and kind of tziruf, this grouping together of Kriyat Shema and Shema Esrei. And the goal of that is kind of that Kriyat Shema and Shema Esrei are kind of the two I'd say like apexes of a person's kabbalah umchut shemayim. Right, Kriyat Shema, that's kind of what we say the whole idea of at least the first paragraph is. It's about being makabel umchut shemayim. And obviously, immediately Fnei Hashem requires like an incredibly high amount of that as well. And when you're mesamech gul tefillah, you kind of create this new madriga, this super kabbalah umchut shemayim. He calls it a chativa achat shel kabbalah umchut shemayim that you can't get without being joining them together, and doing so, thank you, kind of enhances your tefillah in like a whole new way, because you're davening with this new kind of level of kabbalah umchut shemayim. I actually think you can kind of base these two models for the first, what it would mean that smicha gula tefillah is a din in tefillah, on the two ways the Gemara explains the machloket between Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Shloshim Levi. The part we skipped earlier, back in the core one, the second line, Gemara says, "B'mai kamiflagi, iba yisem akrav, iba yisem asvara. Iba yisem asvara, the Rabbi Yochanan savar geula more tanami havi, el geula ma'ayisar lo havia el atzafra." Rabbi Yochanan thinks that both at night and at day there was a meaning different parts of geula mitzrayim took place. We say that Paro told Bnei Yisrael to leave at night. It's just that it didn't finish until later until morning, and therefore, but both of them are stages of the gula, and therefore you should be mesamech gula tefillah by both of them. Sorry. Rabbi Shloshim Levi savar kivan lo havi el mitzafra lo havi guma. So since really the thing didn't happen until the day, it's the time where we should kind of focus our divrei shevach to divrei shevach for Yetziat Mitzrayim is by in the morning by shachar. Okay. V'bay semakra v'shnei mikra echad ashu t'chtiv b'shach b'chol kumecha. Rabbi Yochanan savar ma kishliv kima ma kima kriyat shema b'achar kach tefillah. Right, there's a heck between shliva and kima. So too by the morning where you say kriyat shema and then you daven. At night you should also say kriyat shema and then daven. Rabbi Shloshim Levi savar ma kishliva kima ma kima kriyat shema samach mitato af shliva nami kriyat shema samach mitato. Fine. Now I actually think you can like fit these two explanations of the machloket really well with two ways we've explained smicha gula tefillah as it in tefillah. Meaning, if you hold it all about the matir, well, what's the matir? You give, right? What did Rashi explain? Right, you give shevach to Hakadosh Baruch Hu about Yetziat Mitzrayim, and I did that shevach. You right now you have a matir. But you can daven and ask for your needs. So the first kind of explanation of the machloket focus is entirely on the gula. When is the proper time to give shevach for the gula? All right, but the second explanation of the machloket, right, ibay sema kra, it doesn't actually talk at all about. It doesn't mention. I mean, we're talking about chiv smicha gula tefillah, but it doesn't mention gula mitzrayim at all. It doesn't mention being the bracha of Gal Yisrael at all. So, meaning, how does this relate to our discussion of smicha gula tefillah? Because like we just said, smicha gula tefillah might not actually be about dafka being mesamech the bracha of Gal Yisrael and the shevach of gula mitzrayim to tefillah. It might be about creating this tziruf between kriyat shema and tefillah, and that's why it makes perfect sense, right? The lashon Gemara is that right. Ma kima kriyat shema b'achar kach tefillah. Af shliva nami kriyat shema b'achar kach tefillah. We're focused on kriyat shema and tefillah together. I think that works kind of well with the two ways we explained it. So all that's fine. And then, we get to the Rambam, and yeah, shocker. I'm not going to read it all inside, but basically, the Rambam on the one hand, he paskins explicitly that there's a chiyuv smicha gula tefillah, both by Shachrit and by Marab, not like Rav Hagon, like Tosfot. They have a chiyuv to be so much gula tefillah by both of them. But on the other hand, he says that by Shachar, you actually can't stop in between the bracha of Gal Yisrael and the start of your Shemona Esrei for anything. You can't even, right? He even says, look, clearly you shouldn't be saying Amen to the bracha of Gal Yisrael. And you should go right into, right, what's his Lashon? Right away you stand up and you daven quietly. But by Ma'ariv, he actually says that you're allowed to, not only allowed to, what you're supposed to do is you should say Amen to the bracha, first of all, and then you should say Kaddish. He doesn't mention Yirei Neinu, but he says you should say Kaddish. And right, if we're holding that there's a chiyuv smicha gula to about both of them, then what's the difference? Right? Why should by Shachar you have to omen biad and lachash, and by Ma'ariv you're allowed to stop and you're supposed to stop and say Kaddish in between. So what you can suggest is the Rambam is a combination of these two dinim that we just explained. By Shachris, you have both a chiyuv smicha gula tefillah mitzad ma'atir and mitzad this tziruf of Kriyat Shema and Shemona Esrei. Now, if the goal is to have this tziruf of Kriyat Shema and Shemona Esrei, then you're not going to want to be have any sort of hefsek in between, right, the Birkos Kriyat Shema and when you start Shemona Esrei, because otherwise you're going to kind of break the chibur, and therefore you have to be right. But by Ma'ariv, you could say that there's only a chiyuv smicha gula tefillah mitzad the matir. And how do we explain the matir? The matir is alidei divrei shevach you give to Hashem or gula mitzrayim. So you get like your foot in the door, and now you can ask for all your needs. But this idea doesn't right. There's no reason it has to be limited to shevach alidei geula. It could be kind of expanded to any kind of consecutive shevach leading into tefillah, right? So one shevach is Baruch Hashem Gal Yisrael. Another shevach is recognizing Hashem as the Shomer Mo Yisrael Ad. And another shevach is saying Yizkara v'Yizkara Shemei Rabbah, meaning realizing that making his name great. And if it's all about giving shevach and getting and kind of having a matir to daven, that makes perfect sense. Why you can say Kaddish in between, and we can also understand through this why meaning how the Gemara considers hashkivenu a gula richta. It's not gula richta because it talks about the gula and has something to do with Yitzhak Mitzrayim. It's a gula because it's a gula richta because it's a continuation of the same idea of what we're trying to do with Gal Yisrael. Just like Gal Yisrael, we're giving Shevach to Hashem, and I did that getting a matir daven. So too, I did Kaddish and I did hashkivenu. We give a shevach to get a matir daven. I think through that you can explain the difference in the Rama between smicha gula tefillah by Shachris and smicha gula tefillah by Ma'ariv. Ezra.
So, well, why is that true that there's a difference between Shachri and Ma'ariv?
Okay, so
Might be beyond the scope.
yeah, I mean, I wasn't going to talk about it, but basically, or you can kind of take it or leave it. But I was looking at those Rishimot Shiurim, the red ones, and didn't connect it to this specifically, but right when talking about the machloket about Ma'ariv Tefillah Arvis Rishus and kind of trying to explain that. He mentions that by Ma'ariv, right, we say tefillah keneged korbanot tiknu, and by Ma'ariv, there's not really a korban; it's just the eating or the burning, that. So the Ramban al Torah talks about how when you give a korban, there's when you do the zrika of the dam on the mizbeach. The idea of the zrika of the dam on the mizbeach is that you're kind of giving yourself over to, it's a form of like symbolic mesira nefesh and giving yourself over to Hashem. So the Rav connected to meaning by Shachris when you have this zrika hadam, Shachris connected is mitaken connected the korban tamid. So therefore you're going to have this idea of Mesir Nefesh, which is right, obviously a form of kabbalah or l'chut shmayim. But by Mar, right, and there's going to be a chiyuv for that. But by Mar, where it's actually where the korban is actually not, there's no zrika. So he says maybe there wouldn't be the same din of chiyuv kabbalah or l'chut shmayim by Mar. Yeah. Okay. I've come. Thanks everyone for coming.
Hey, Zachy.
Oh my God.
He was amazing. Okay. Zachy.
More of a negative on this time.
Great job, Zachy.
They have your comment. I don't know if they want to say it.
That's your cough, Zachy.
Oh, wow.
Oh, he's getting so many hugs.
I'm
Zachy.
so proud of you. I'm so proud of you, Zachy.
Are there any questions from the Zoom audience?
Yeah, I want to see all his friends who came.
Oh, you want to see the friends again?
In the last container is most of our
Oh, there you go.
Did you guys all give Zachy a hug?
Anytime,
What?
Hi.
Eitan, have any more eggs?
Hi, everybody.
Egg him.
I don't have any
more eggs, Ariel. I apologize. This is Zachy's family.
Hi, guys. Eitan, did you give him a hug?
I did give him a big hug. Should I give him another hug for you?
I'll hold the camera while he gives him a hug.
Okay, let me see. Oh.
That's fake hug. I've never seen one.
Okay, I'm back. Do you want to meet all of Zachy's friends?
Yeah.
Should meet all your friends?
No, it's okay.
Zachy's friend.
I know Zachy's little brother. I spoke to him on the phone a few times.
Yeah.
There's Natan Levine, Zachy's roommate. Hi.
Hi, I'm so
Natan, nice
sorry,
to meet you.
Natan.
Oh, it's great. What?
What
I
you
requested
sorry
Zachy.
about?
There's nothing to be sorry about. Zachy's great.
Oh.
Zachy's pretty messy, but that's fine.
He steals my chargers, but it's fun.
Makes me feel better about myself.
Okay, good.
Oh my God, he made me cry more than anything the whole day. I was doing fine until this.
Oh, it's my rabbi uncle.
That was awesome.
Really.
And then he copied your odd com.
Hi, Shoshana. We're on, Zachy just finished his shirt.
Wow.
Hi, Esther.
I know.
Also?
Yeah.
Hi,
Okay.
Perry.
Okay.
Thank you, Perry, for the invitation.
Zachy,
wish I
Perry
could
just
come.
came.
Any questions?
Zachy, Perry just
Yeah.
came.
Hi, P.
What?
Okay. Zachy.
Zachy, you're amazing.
Zachy, there's an epic raya.
What?
Easy, why can't we see you?
I'm here.
No.
You did a great
Davida.
job.
Thank you.
Zachy, that was an epic raya.
Because I'm in pajamas, but I'm saying hi to everyone.
Ariel, did you get Johnny the Zick listening?
Yeah. Called him in.
You sent him the link?
Yeah, but ready? He left early, but he was like, guys, I have a joke for you. He was like, what do you say when you make a basketball shot?
He's like, sorry, I'm at the opera.
Hi, Zachy. Hi, Zachy. Are you still there?
Thank you.
Hi, Zachy.
Yeah, here.
Hi, great job.
Hello? Yes, after.
So proud of you. I'm sorry I couldn't make it, but I was with you here from home.
Yeah,
Kol hakavod.
thank you.
Very
Thank you.
proud. Very proud of you. Love you.
Thank you.
Zachy,
Yeah.
if there was any bad behavior while you were giving your shear, it's because of henna.
What?
If there was any bad
No, we're still
behavior while you were
recording all
giving your
this.
shear, it's
Is
because
that
of henna.
If there was any bad behavior during